Okay. I think we're live.
Hey, John.
Hey, Rafael. Okay. Welcome. It's 2:00 and we're going to start our webinar. Welcome to the latest edition of TGI's webinar with informative, interesting, engaging people. I'm John Salek, your host, and today we certainly have one of those individuals. We're going to be speaking with award-winning author Rafael Hines. Actually, his middle name is Amadeus, which we may touch on at some point in the future. That's just such a powerful name. Among other things, Rafael is responsible for the highly successful, extremely popular Bishop's War and Bishop's War series. We're going to talk to Rafael about his journey, his writing process, what he thinks of self-publishing, maybe what he's going to do in the future too. And then we're going to set aside some time for questions. Anybody checking in can look at the chat section on the side of the platform, and you can type in questions, and we will try and get to as many as possible. We'll talk to Rafael for about 25, 30 minutes and get into there. So without wasting any time, let me introduce Rafael Amadeus Hines. He has a fascinating background. It stretches from the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And if any of you know about the Lower East Side of Manhattan, especially 20 or 30 years ago, it's a lot different than it is today, all the way to Georgetown, where he studied English. He's been involved in the music industry. He's been a restaurateur. He's now involved in the energy financial markets, if I'm correct. And of course, now into writing. And he wanted to let everybody know his great love. We had to clarify this is basketball. His greatest love. And I said, well, is that greater than your family? And he hemmed and hawed, said, no, it's not greater than my family, but I bet it's close. We'll talk about Georgetown maybe a little bit further on too. So now we'll let Rafael do some talking. And so it's been quite a journey where it carried you from, to becoming this successful independent author, which is so rare. It's rare for anyone to be successful in regards to the quality of their work. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Your background and where you came from, and then we'll get into a little bit of how writing developed. But tell us, because you do have an incredibly rich background. So
thanks, John, for that warm introduction, of course, and great to be here. As you mentioned, grew up on the Lower East Side, it's called Alphabet City, in that small little area between Avenue A and Avenue D. 14th Street to Houston Street in Manhattan, but it was a wild time. It was a lot of crime. It was a really drug infested neighborhood. But for us as kids, it was a lot of fun. And my block had so many amazing characters. It was kind of this amalgamation of guys coming back from Vietnam. And this is going back into the late 60s and 70s. I'm aging, obviously. Alluding to my age here, but it was there was bank robbers, there was a crew of jewel thieves, there was the dealers, and everyone met at this bar right on the corner, which is now a Starbucks, and it was like Switzerland. Like the cops would be there, the firemen, and everyone was just hanging out drinking, and us as kids would just be running around, running errands. When they had dice games, we'd be counting out thousands of dollars. So it was a great, when I later in life, coming full circle, becoming a writer, my initial, when I jumped into it, it was hearing those voices and the humor and the dialogue of all those guys who are always hilarious and all great storytellers.
So tell us a little bit then. Well, actually, let's step back one step. You went from the Lower East Side to Georgetown. I'm thinking the early 70s. I don't want to give anybody.
Yeah, class of 83, so 79, 83. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Actually, right around my time in college. What was that transition like? If people don't know what the Lower East Side was like, and it's not, I don't mean in a bad way, but it was a colorful place. Now it's an incredibly trendy place.
Yeah.
But back then, was there a culture shock going to Georgetown?
It was huge for me. And then I went my high school was a Friends school in Poughkeepsie, which was a coeducational boarding school, one of the oldest in the nation. And it was really at that time, was taking inner city youth who were at risk. And I was getting into a lot of trouble as my friends were. And I, got to see something else. So it was the journey from going to a small boarding school. We had 120 kids in the whole school, to then going to Georgetown. That was a huge culture shock for me. And I was I think just maybe mentally, emotionally, maybe unprepared for that. Just full disclosure, but you navigate and you're figuring things out. But yeah, it was. I remember feeling a little awkward when I got there, but it was also a great time.
Tell us how you got involved in writing. Now, and your mom was involved. I mean, because we've spoken many times before. Your mom was involved and had an influence on this. And you didn't go to Georgetown to necessarily study writing, though you did study English.
I started off in the business school, and then I couldn't pass calculus. So I said, "All right, I got to find something. I love to read." And going back to your question about my mom, when I was a kid, we didn't have a TV, and we just had a bunch of books, and she would read and act out all these amazing classics. We would go to the library and get Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, and The Hobbit, and she was reading and acting out all the characters for me when I was like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So coming full circle, when you asked about my writing journey and her influence. When I finally picked up a book, I was actually on a plane. And I picked up a best-selling thriller, and I did not enjoy the book. And obviously, that's subjective. But I said, "Wow, I grew up with so many great storytellers. I'm going to write something about things that happened to me and my friends on the Lower East Side." And then just started writing small stories, and then it eventually grew over 8 years into Bishop's War, my first novel. Mm-hmm. But it was really ties back into my mom's love of the arts, showing me, and a love of reading that continues to this day. I'm an avid reader, and I think that's one of the foundations of being a writer is being a really reading from a wide range of sources.
Right. So just because you touched on that, you don't just read thrillers. When I say thrillers, I mean the standard thrillers, and I don't mean to demean them in any way, because I read, sure. But how wide a range do you read?
It really depends. And also, because I'm an indie author, self-published, and there's such a huge family of independent authors out there who are struggling to find an audience. And I know that I found, an abnormal amount of success for someone who's, for a first time self-published author, that I try to read a lot from romance novels to, in my genre, and thrillers and science fiction, and just to support, other members of this indie author tribe.
Do you read nonfiction as well? Or a lot of
I haven't in a while. I do some, but I have not in a while, and that's sometimes tied to what my kids may be reading. If it's an interesting book that they have for school, I have 2 kids in middle school now, as well as an older son who's 2-time Harvard graduate. So just a shout out to Harvard. But yeah, so that's usually the only time I'll read nonfiction, if it's something tied to my kids' reading list.
Okay, and we are going to get a little more into your reading process. But do your kids read your books?
My eldest son has, but my younger ones, they read snippets, but it's 18 and over.
Okay. All right. Okay.
It's a lot of violence. It's very. I write, I think, quite graphically, and I just maybe 16, 15. I don't know. See.
Fair. So John Bishop. He's your partner. He's a decorated war veteran. He's a special forces guy. He grew up on the Lower East Side.
He did.
In your books, his uncle is Gonzalo Valdez, if I'm correct, crime boss. Now, obviously, you've pulled a lot from your background. I mean, it doesn't genius to figure that out. You're from the Lower East Side. But are your characters based on specific people? Are they amalgams? Are they, how do you?
By and large, yes. And it might not be like the actual character itself. Like Gonzalo Valdez is based on, a real life drug dealer, for want of a better term. But he was more than that. He was also a mentor to me and other people. Like, he told me that this life of crime is not for you. And he was Cuban, Gonzalo's and the Valdez family are all Panamanian, and John Bishop, my character, the lead character in the Bishop series, is Panamanian Jamaican, which is my father's background. So I take pieces of, people that I've met, known, heard speaking, and just kind of incorporate them into a character. And some characters I've also just appear out of nowhere, which is kind of like when you get into the magic of writing, which is really amazing.
So And that's you have this rich background growing up, and then going to Georgetown. But afterwards, after you got out of Georgetown, you owned a jazz club, if I'm not mistaken.
So it was my uncle's restaurant that he had for 20 something years, and he got very ill. Like my senior year at Georgetown, we already knew he was going to pass. He was only 42 years old. So basically going back and forth my senior year to work in the restaurant. And then eventually, once he passed, we converted it, named it after him, Carlos I, and there was also Carlos II, and then turned it into a jazz club, the one downtown, and had that for nearly 15 years.
Okay, and was that? And you also were involved in restaurants. Is it the same?
Well, restaurant, yeah, the same.
Okay.
That was so we had two restaurants, and one was a jazz club and seafood restaurant.
To financial markets and energy through Morningside. I guess what I'm really asking is, so you pulled information out of your colorful, rich, I don't want to say childhood, but adolescent childhood. What did you pull out of your later years? Because we'll get into it in a second. You didn't start writing until a bit later in life. What did you pull out of the second half of, or after Georgetown, after you?
Well, when I really got into the financial markets and software sales and managed data, which I do today, it was one of the catalysts for also my writing as I started to evolve the story. Was I was starting a new job in the South Tower, Tower 2, and I was there with my eldest son on that Friday. And then September 10th of 2001 was supposed to be my start date. And then he had a parent-teacher conference. Well, we had it on Tuesday, September 11th. So I was just like, you know what? Let me not start and then have to leave like my second day. So I pushed my official start date out until Wednesday, the 12th. And then lo and behold, of course, 9/11 happened on that Tuesday morning. So that was a huge driver. And then the thought of, we also thought of after the towers came down that there were going to be add-on attacks of someone blowing themselves up in Macy's or Bloomingdale's and knock wood, that didn't happen. But as the story started evolving in my head, and as the more I wrote, I thought about a lone citizen soldier, someone from my neighborhood stopping a terrorist attack, and that was really the foundational piece of where the story kind of took off. And I was like, okay, now this is going to be something, not just about me and my friends. It's something different and something bigger. So yeah, I did take a lot from just life experiences and people that I've met, but 9/11 was definitely a huge catalyst for my writing.
And when did you start writing? Because we want to tell people this while you were interested in books, and your mom sounds wonderful with what she.
So yeah, it was around 2010-ish, I guess. I was just started playing with it, and then I really fell in love with it. It was a late night. My kids would go to sleep at night, and they were babies at the time. And then I would just, I would just wake up at 1 a.m. and just start typing away, and it was just my late night hobby. And I did that for like 7 years, or maybe a little bit, maybe six years. And coming full circle to your original question about my mom, before we knew she was terminally ill, and before she passed, she just said, "Hey, once she asked me to read my book to her, and then she just said, you have no idea how good this book is." She said, "I won't be here to see it, but do me a favor, just put it on Amazon." She sent me some links on how to self-publish. Throw it on Amazon, put a cover on it, and see what happens, and just do it for me. And that's exactly what I did. I reluctantly self-published my first novel, and promised a mom check and expected to sell 50 copies. And that's what happened for the first 4 or 5 months. And then after that, it just kind of exploded, which obviously I'm forever grateful for.
Touch on how that exploded. But how long did it take you to write Bishop's War?
Almost 8 years. Maybe 7 years. But again, it was just a labor of love. I wasn't like, I didn't have a dream of being getting a publishing contract. I didn't really see myself. I mean, some of my favorite authors, Tom Clancy, Walter Mosley, John Sanford, Elmore Leonard, I think is one of the masters. And many of Robert Ludlum, Stephen Hunter. But there's so many that I was just like, I'm not a writer. I'm just playing around with. I like writing, So I didn't think I was good enough to, or even equated it with, being up there with any of those guys.
Yeah. Okay. And it did come out. So how did the process? And you've written 2 books now, and I think more come. We're going to talk about that a little later. But You write Bishop's War. Took you a long time. Maybe it was a process, whatever, a process personal that went beyond simply the writing, though writing never goes simply beyond the writing or never stays simply in the writing. What was the process of creating Bishop's War, writing Bishop's War? And then did that come, how was Bishop's Law different? And, is there an outline? Do you just wing it? Are you watching Georgetown basketball over your shoulder? Oh, Christ,
I'd like to say that I have this like outline and but I don't. For Bishop's War, again, it was just like characters started appearing and it was just kind of this labor of love. And I couldn't stop. I just wanted to constantly get back to it. And then, with all the success that came about through, this fan base for the Bishop, for John Bishop, and people saying, hey, where's book two? Book two was harder for me because, I had an audience now of tens of thousands of people around the world. And I just said, wow. And then especially the military component. Now, you haven't really talked about that. I've never served in the military. And I was like, part of my research, which I really got into, was looking at Green Beret tactics, because John Bishop is a former Green Beret and his team. And there's, battles in Afghanistan and in book two in Iraq and Mosul and throughout the world. So I spent a lot of time doing the research, which I really enjoyed as well. And so I would just say book two was harder. I didn't do an outline, but I really had the vision of the book before I started writing it. And then it took me, I guess I took off about a year. I had hip surgery, and not to go into all the details of why people don't write, but it took me about 2 years to write Bishop's Law. And now I'm working on Bishop's Honor, book 3.
When you talk about research, I know when we spoke, you said you got a lot of feedback from the military over your first, You got a lot of feedback in general over your books. Your books, we'll talk about how they became successful. They became successful because they were interesting and well written, but you got a lot of feedback, both from the military and other people, other readers. And so that certainly helped with your research. But tell us a little bit about that feedback, both on the sort of the technical end and from servicemen and women.
Yeah, it's really been one of the greatest honors of my life to have so many, veterans, active duty, men and women who were deployed. Like, I was getting emails from a combat outpost in Afghanistan, and I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And some of the feedback was like criticism too. And they were like, hey, listen, you messed this up. Tactically, this is not what we would do. And then, or you've got the weapon wrong or something along those lines. But I was like, okay, well, all right, thank you. And then I would just make a change and do my do the edits. And then I would just say, hey, let me send you a signed copy with your changes in there, just so you're connected to this as well. And then again, it's been such a surreal journey. One of the greatest honors of my life is this. I don't know if anyone can see it here, but it's a Ringu stick from a civil affairs team, which is part of the U.S. Army. They train just like special forces.
Rafael, so everybody can see that a little bit better.
So it has John Bishop on one side and Djibouti, where they were stationed in Africa, and then my name on the back with the unit citation. So it was just incredible just to receive this from guys who are actively deployed, risking their lives, to take the time to make something like this for me. And then they were saying, we wish John Bishop was going down range with us. And so shout out to Sergeant Martin Sierra. He's a true American hero. He actually joined the Army the summer of 2001 with his son, went to basic training with his son, which is like unheard of. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, and he's been deployed. He's actually retiring, I think, this year, but he's been in, fighting Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, ISIS, Boko Haram, and every other terrorist organization from the Middle East to Africa for the last 20 years. So it's just incredible, the sacrifices and selflessness that these Americans, men and women, it's just such hats off to them. It's an honor for them to even acknowledge me for after all the things that they do.
Yeah. You have an ongoing relationship with some of these guys, like the sergeant you mentioned. And what I'm understanding, what we've talked about in the past, you've also visited VA hospitals and centers and talked to servicemen and women who are either injured or working through post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that, it's like living in gratitude. And, when I had this, little modicum of success come my way, I was just like, okay, well, my book is somehow connecting to this veteran and military community. What can I do to give back? And then I would just take books over to the VA hospitals and just sit and chat. And guys want to tell their stories, great. If you want to just talk about sports or whatever. So it's been really, again, just such an honor. And some of those stories I put into the books, so there's a lot of like real things that I change a little, but it's just to have an acceptance connection to these guys who are, the true heroes who are doing so much and sacrificing so much for us.
Mm-hmm. So going into Bishop's War, did you do Bishop's War? I'm sorry, I got the books mixed up. I'm sorry, and I have autographed copies of them. Bishop's War is the second book, correct?
Bishop's Law is book 2. Bishop's War is book 1.
Oh, going into Bishop's Law, did you know you had to do specific research going in? There are battle scenes and locations I know that you did, but was it technical material?
Some of it was technical. I wanted to get a little more technical with some of the weaponry, and I was just going back to it because I love the Tom Clancy novels. So, and then in writing it, I realized I think I got a little too technical. There was too many little acronyms, and I had to pull some of those out for a better flow. But I have the opening chapter is in the Battle for Mosul. Okay. So, and I wanted to just, again, I'm making up a story. I'm painting a picture, but I just want to have some elements of the weapons these guys actually use and some of the tactics that they actually, put in place when they're in combat.
And because you were able to deal with servicemen who had returned from the Middle East or the war on terrorism, which is so wide and so complicated. Beyond the technical aspect of what they told you, what were you able to incorporate either into John Bishop in the second book or some of the servicemen and people that surround him about what the emotions were, or maybe what they're thinking, motivation, whatever, that go beyond simply, this is how we approach a fire.
It's a great question, John, and I think it ties back almost to growing up. I don't want to equate Iraq and Afghanistan with growing up in Alphabet City, but you grow up in a war zone and you're surrounded by violence and life and death situations, and you lose friends in whatever circumstances, whatever setting. I think there's an element of there's camaraderie. There's also love and loyalty, which is a big component of people who are from the Lower East Side. And then there's also the comedy, like you're facing all this, day in and day out, and you kind of laugh your way through really stressful and unnaturally stressful situations. And that's one thing that all the soldiers that I've hung out with and been fortunate enough to sit, be a fly on the wall and hear their stories about just you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God. And they're just like, kind of like telling it almost as a comedy skit, with the exception, of course, of when they're losing, friends and comrades. Yeah. But yeah, it's just so one of the themes of my book is the love and loyalty of John, his family, his military team, who all come together, to fight, with battles against terrorism in New York City, and also go back to Afghanistan to take down this Bin Laden-like warlord.
Were you able to deal with any service women
I'm sorry?
Were you able to get feedback from service women too, or
through critiques and some emails and also reviews, because again the reviews are I've got some harsh reviews. So not like one-on-one, just to but when I was at the VA hospital, of course, you're talking to everyone. But in terms of, the one-on-ones with Martin, Sergeant Sierra and others, it's been primarily guys.
Okay. Interesting. Let's talk about independent publishing. So you produced it, because we want to set aside for questions. Sure. You wrote the book, the first book, obviously. It was an extended period. You finish it, and I'm kind of paraphrasing for you, like, well, what do I do with it? And you have this text, you say, okay, I'm happy. What do I do with it? I got to stop writing with it. You didn't go to the publishing house. You went the independent route, which is easier and easier today, sometimes more effective than a publishing house. certainly you're an example of that, and even authors who go to publishing houses often. And I know there are a lot of independent authors listening in. It's a tough grind. It's a tough grind whether you're with a publishing house or independent. So, but you went the independent route. Tell us about how that occurred, and we're going to touch a little bit of what you learned and the do's and don'ts, or
Yeah, it's great questions, and it's a lot. I mean, we could spend just an hour just talking about that in and of itself. But in a nutshell, I'll just say that it's rewarding in the sense when you're the CEO, you're the head of R&D, you're the head of marketing, you work in the mailroom, you do it all. So owning it all is great. But again, the challenges of a new author in this, as an independent self-published author, putting this labor of love up for the world to see, and now sharing it and finding an audience can be very challenging. I found I was very fortunate that I think my book cover had a big component as to why people first started just clicking out on Amazon. And I guess once they opened it up and you can read the samples for free, and then they started buying it. And that kind of launched this trajectory. Once I had this initial success, which was really shocking, unexpected and shocking and amazing. I then said, okay, well, I'm in sales. I've been doing this for a long time in my day job. What can I do to accelerate this? So I tried a laundry list of, these promotional websites that, hey, we will make you a best-selling author, and promise you sky in the sky, all this, pie in the sky. And the vast majority of them was just throwing money down a tunnel. So, but there's a few that really are effective. And the key, I think, for any self-published author is one, the writing itself, of course. Two is having a cover that really connects some way emotionally or some way or with your audience. And then figuring out how to engage your audience. Once as I keep on mentioning, my audience kind of came to me by accident, and once I got them, it grew, and I did some things. BookBub is a great venue for getting on there. You have to submit your book, and they, sometimes they reject you if you don't have enough reviews. But it's a great way of expanding your audience. But it's a grind. It really is. And the other thing I just want to say thank you to there's this huge indie author community, and they kind of embraced me. I joined Twitter, and just everyone supporting each other with just positivity, good energy, encouragement. So that's really been, and I try to give back as well by supporting, the indie author community in every way I possibly can.
Do you think independent authors in general don't pay enough attention to their book covers? Mainly because they may not be getting ancillary help from the publishing house, though we've all seen a lot of lousy covers from publishing houses too.
Yep.
Is that a key? I mean, we all buy a lot of. I don't buy ebooks. I still buy hardcover.
Okay. You buy the paperbacks, hardcovers, yeah.
But I buy.
I'm not going to categorically say as a blanket statement that indie authors have bad covers. I wouldn't say that, but what I would say is I would turn it around and just say I would encourage every indie author to really think about their cover. Even I'd say, and even for myself, for book 2, Bishop's Law, I actually am not happy with the cover. I feel like I made a mistake in terms of how I presented it. But again, you just really give it a lot of thought, because people are so visual in terms of, what they connect with. If you have I think less than 0.3 second, less than a third of a second to actually grab someone's eye and have them pause to look at your book and hopefully click in it. So I would really encourage everyone to spend a lot of time thinking about it and hiring someone, who's really good at making the covers.
Did you think about a financial budget for your promotion? And you did a lot of it yourself, but there's still money involved in producing the book, and you produced a limited number of paperbacks that were primarily given away, correct?
No, there was no limit. I have my books on Amazon, both digital and paperback. Okay. But what I did is I would take, you get a discount on author copies, and I would, get boxes of them, and I would ship them to, military bases overseas. Again, take them to the VA hospitals, hand out books to someone, if you're on a plane with someone who's like, oh, and just, it's like, hey, by the way, here you go. And so that was, obviously there's a cost associated with that. For the promotional side, I did test it out, but I was like, I'm investing in myself. So I said, let's just test it and see how things perform. And you can tell pretty quickly what's successful and what's not. So yeah, it's been trial and error. One of the things that really worked for me was Twitter. I got a free book and it said how to get 100,000 followers in a year, 2.5 hours a day, every day. I did that for a year, and I had 150,000 followers at my peak. That number has diminished because I just don't have the time to keep on adding content. But yeah, it's like, just as an example, that was a time investment that I did, every day for a year, you know, and it paid off for me. But I know there's other authors who say Twitter doesn't work for them, but it really depends.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the future. So
Sure.
You're going to, and first of all, I think I want to make sure you have a full-time job.
Yeah.
Right. You have sort of like 2 full-time jobs plus a family. And you probably go nuts watching Georgetown basketball at times. And
sometimes pull out what little hair I have.
Yeah, exactly. But what's your next? You're in the process of writing another book, Bishop's Honor. What's that like, and where do you see your future activities going?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to continue the series. It's interesting. I've had lulls. Like, I finished Bishop's Law, and then I was like, oh man, it's like the sense of relief. So I kind of stopped writing. Then I was really doing a lot of marketing again to keep the second book going. And that takes away from the creative process. And one of the drawbacks of being self-published and having to do all the marketing yourself, for me, 3 a.m, I get a tap on the shoulder, and the characters are saying, hey, come on, get up. I got something to say. And then I kept doing this, I kept pushing them away. And the more you do that, they eventually stop talking. So now I'm kind of like recharged, getting back into it in full swing, doing a lot of research for book 3. My goal is to have this series continue. I don't see any end in sight. Working, with some people who have been kind enough to want to try to promote this as a movie, as the series, as a franchise. So that's going on in the background. My audiobooks will be out beginning of October. I think the first book is nearly finished, and then I'm going to start on book 2. So
your books?
I'm sorry?
Are you narrating your own book?
I am not. I actually thought about it, but it's like it's a skill. And we had 132 auditions with sample scripts, and you can see the people who were actually professional narrators versus guys like me who think, oh yeah, how hard could it be? And we finally narrowed it down and found a fantastic narrator, so Carrie Height. So looking forward to getting those out there. I probably will release them both at the same time, because I know for myself personally, I want to go from one book to the next right away. So I wouldn't want to have a lull, but we'll see. I might release Bishop's War, which will be ready first.
And talking about going from one book to another, Rafael is kind enough to have put up a special deal for your books. There are, saying this properly, they're both on limited time offers, selling for half price as an introductory.
Just the ebooks. So if anyone wants it, I mean, they were only $3.99 to begin with, but it's a 2-day promotion.
Hopefully, don't undersell your books. Don't undersell. They're a steal at $3.99, and people who should, if they have, and I would encourage you, because they're great, to take this offer up, and then donate what you would have paid somewhere else to a charity. Right? Is that a good message?
That'd be awesome.
Was your first 2 books related to current events, to an extent, or reflect to the times?
Sure. So the book actually takes place in 2016, where John's coming back from Afghanistan, and that's I'm going to accelerate them in the coming series. Right. But there is a Black Democratic president who I actually write a speech for at the beginning of the speech. Not exactly what Obama would have said, but maybe what I hoped he would have said. Right. And then in book 2, Bishop's Law, A Republican has now come into office, and there's, but I again, it's not a Trump versus Obama.
Right.
There's some, I know there have some of my readers, I'm like, love the book, except for, you've got an Obama-like character. And then, it was just like, this is not, I'm writing fiction. But again, I do tie, and joking aside, tying, events with not actual terrorist attacks, but just kind of think out of the box, especially after anyone who's been in New York or experienced any of the atrocities during the war on terror during the last 20 years. I just try to think about how these guys will actually combat such a radical, attacks on our country.
And that's kind of what I wanted to get into a little bit in terms of, I got the specifics, but the war on terror may not be winding down, but America's troops on the ground in Afghanistan are winding down. And I'm not asking anybody to put up their political beliefs as to whether or not they should be, but for servicemen and women who had been over there, and you see this pullout, some would undoubtedly question, was it worth it? Oh my God, what did we do this for? The Taliban is taking over provincial cities, and this may change, and I got that. But does that play into any of what John Bishop is thinking?
I've had those conversations for sure, and I do try to be cognizant of what's happening in real world events, while at the same time, just telling a story, which is again about, pain, love, sacrifice, brotherhood, and family.
Okay. Now, we're going to start taking questions in a minute, but I did want to, you said that you're also interested. You're looking also to take these books and maybe turn them into videos, movies, or something like that too. How's that progressing? How difficult is that for authors? Is that
I've been approached by a few different people over the years who said, "Hey, this is going to be it's a fantastic movie." And many of my readers say the same thing, like, "Wow, this is every chapter is like either a new scene, a new episode in the series, or it's a great movie in and of itself." That being said, I know it's a hard and challenging job. The first time I was having this dialogue, they were like, "This is going to be a movie." I thought, "Well, okay, it's going to happen next week," and clearly that's not the case.
It didn't happen.
Didn't happen. So, I have some people working on that now, approaching producers and actors, and again, we'll see. Sometimes it's just being in the room or handing someone the book, who just says, "Wow, this is it," and them connecting the same way so many of my readers have. So it hasn't happened yet, but knock wood.
And then one question, because we do have a list of questions on the chat side. Is Patrick Ewing going to show up in any of these books?
No, it's a good question. I did have some references. Actually, he's in book one. I shouldn't say that. He's referenced in book one in Bishop's book. They're arguing about who's the greatest Nick of all time. So yes, Patrick is in the book.
Okay, all right. Nothing about Georgetown. All right. Okay, there's some questions that we took in. One viewer, somebody, a participant, an audience member, however we want to phrase it, asked, do you have writer's block? I mean, writer's block, and how do you break it? And that, I get a little different than, oh my God, I've got all this other stuff to do.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to exactly what I mentioned before, where it's like, I was just like, "Hey guys, leave me alone. I don't want to write right now." And the more I did that, like when the voices for me, because it's a lot of times I'll wake up from a dream and I'm dreaming the scene. And so, and then when I pushed all that away, over an extended period of time, the voices stop, and then I'm not writing. And then when I have to jumpstart it, it's hard because your writing muscles are like any other muscle. If you don't exercise them, you're not as good. So it takes me a big ramp up period. And I was just in Puerto Rico for a week doing exactly that, basically doing a just writer's retreat. My kids were surfing in Nantucket, and I was just like, I need to just get away and sit down and write on a balcony by the water. And that's what I did for 6 days.
So you couldn't couldn't go to Sandusky, Ohio. You had to go to Puerto Rico to write.
It could, but I actually I get more inspired by the water. I will say that, but and I wanted to go someplace like I had gone to Florida in the past, but with COVID exploding there, I wasn't going to go there.
There we go. Someone else has asked, is your goal to become a full-time writer?
I would love that. That's as I'm getting up in years at some point, I do love my day job, but I would love to just do this full time. And I feel like I would be able to deliver novels, especially if they're in the Bishop series. And I have a few other, like I want to write a story about the Lower East Side. And then my father has such an amazing journey from his first pair of shoes at 18 in the mountains of Panama and Jamaica to coming to New York City and finding his fortune. So there's a lot of other books besides the Bishop series I want to write, but I would love to be a full-time author.
Okay. Yes. Somebody also asked, and it's kind of related to other things, how do you manage writing, your job, and your family? How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's, fortunately for me, I have been a night owl for most of my life. And my mom, the same thing. I remember being up with my mom. She would be reading to me like sometimes 1 a.m. when I was like 6 years old. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of what I'm programmed to do. And so I typically do my best work late at night, very early in the morning. And then have an extra cup of coffee that day when I'm doing presentations, for my day job. Okay. But yeah, it's a life balance where it's a constant struggle, especially when I'm really like right now I'm in the kind of the Bishop's honor is going, but it's not like going. Like I'm not like, oh my God, I have to stop everything else. So I still have time for my kids.
Okay.
As of today.
Good. Did they want you to go to Nantucket, or were they happy that you went to Puerto Rico?
That was actually all moms and kids, so I was not invited. That's why I picked Puerto Rico. I was like, okay, well, I've got a week just to figure out something to do, somewhere to go.
We have another question from a Mike Rodriguez, and he says, with your creative juices flowing and your imagination running wild, at what point do you write it all down? Do you wait to have it all percolate in your mind? I'm paraphrasing now. Percolate in your mind, or do you write it down in snippets? And then
it's kind of just scene by scene. I actually, for Bishop's Law, I actually saw the entire book. I didn't put an outline down, but before I started writing it, I actually knew where the book was going. Mm-hmm. Bishop's Honor, I don't want to give anything away, but I actually listened to a little podcast, and then it gave me an idea. So it's a combination of things, but I don't write it all down. It's really and the more I write, it just takes me down different paths where I may not expect. But yeah, I don't start with an outline.
Here's a totally side question from either a Beth Jacobson or a Seth Jacobson, and he just writes Frasier ! I think he's probably assuming that was the greatest Nick of all time.
Clyde.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Clyde could be something else too.
Yeah.
Get that in there. Somebody else says, how do you get book reviews as an independent author?
Yeah, it's challenging. I want to just give a shout out to my LES neighborhood. So many friends, family, Linda Mateus, Tade Reen, the list goes on and on. Louis Sullivan. There's so many people, Marcus, who have kind of really been my early readers and almost like my beta readers, and were kind enough who enjoyed it. I said, listen, if you don't like it, don't put a bullshit review up there. If you don't like it, I don't want anything fake. And that was kind of the jump start. So I would say that, send it out far and wide to everyone, and just get that initial momentum going. I will say that from a review perspective or readers, it's a herd mentality. So the more reviews you have, the easier it is to find a new audience. So it's really critical to try to get as many reviews as possible.
I think anybody who's looked at books online, whether they're ebooks or hardcover or paperbacks or tangible books, obviously you gravitate to books that have a lot of reviews, let alone a lot of stars. Generally have a lot of reviews. Their star rating is pretty high. But if you see a book that has 12 reviews or 6 reviews and you think, well, what the heck is this? And it may be a great book, and that's
yeah, and that's the tragedy about being especially self-published. And I know for myself, if we're giving reviews, if I don't have anything good to say, I don't say anything, because I've read a lot of self-published novels where I think the authors are great, but the book is maybe lacking, and I won't give them a 2-star or 3-star. It's either I'm going to give them a 4 or 5-star review or nothing.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. What's the biggest misconception about being a self-published author? You're sitting at the Algonquin every Thursday for.
I don't know if people realize just the amount of time and effort that anyone who's a creative who likes to write, paint, whatever it may be, there's a passion there, and then when you're sharing it with the world, it's obviously initial. There's fear involved and trepidation and all those things, and you're like, oh, is this going to be good enough? And we're our harshest critics. But I will also say that the amount of work and effort to try to find you, the audience, it's a monumental task that's ongoing. Right. So it's not an easy. It's not like, oh, hey, this guy's a self-published author. He's like sitting up there sipping champagne. It's not like that at all. Okay,
all right. Somebody asked, and we should have mentioned this. Well, why doesn't Rafael have a website? Rafael does have a website.
I do.
And give us the address.
It's www.rafaelhines.com, and Rafael with an F.
Okay.
Rafael.
Right. Hines.com.
Hines.com.
So that's we should have mentioned that. I'm sorry. Would you go into a publishing house now?
At this point, I'm not sure. I've actually contemplated getting an agent to pitch it to publishing houses, but from my feedback from some authors that I know that are published, they're like, they wouldn't even, you've had so much success already. Yeah. What else could they give to what else can they do for you? And I don't think they're giving out 7-figure contracts anymore. Yeah. So I actually like, owning it all myself. Right. Unless there's some, massive deal on the table. If there's a random house, if you're listening, we can talk.
Well, but your books are incredibly successful, and we're not getting into numbers. They're not sort of successful. They're incredibly successful, even by anyone's standards, publishing house or not. It's a little surprising. Some publishing houses haven't grabbed you and said, "Come," and that's fine. And there are people who are, I just lost my train of thought. Doesn't matter. Getting older. That's all right. I want to get one last sort of comment in here. This is from a Melissa who asked if this is all being recorded because you're so damn handsome. And I'm assuming she means you and not me. It's gonna, and we will be happy to send anyone links if they will send us an email. But it is also going to be placed on the USA.com site. If anyone wants a copy of this thing, we're happy to send you a link to that site. Just email us. And I believe you can email us at info@wellwellusa.com. That's our sister company from the SALAC group. That's available too. We have taken up about 50 minutes of your time.
Can I add one more thing? I just want to say that, and for anyone who's on, I love speaking with authors or anyone one-on-one. You can email me through my website, and I respond to all questions, Q&A, whatever it is. Okay. So if you want to just contact me directly, again, www.rafaelhines.com. Okay. Please don't hesitate.
All right. And maybe in March we can have an event around the Big East tournament if they're gonna have people around.
Yeah, would love that.
We can go. We could
live from Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank everybody for showing up and listening in. We had a great audience, lots of great questions. I appreciate that, and of course we want to thank Rafael for his time and insights and for producing great books and touching base with servicemen who care. I'd like the links. Sarah just said I'd like the links and references mentioned. Thank you for your time. Again, rafaelhines.com. And we will post these elsewhere. Anybody who registered for this event, we will send you all the links you need to get in touch with that. The video will be posted on wellwellusa.com. We'll also send you the links to that. So I want to thank everybody for attending. enjoy the rest of the day. And Rafael, thanks a lot.
And thank you, John, for hosting and having me. And thank you for everyone who's online and listening. It's been great and a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Rafael. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.